Hi, I'm Jarvis. For 9 years, I worked double shifts and skipped meals so my wife could chase her dream of becoming a lawyer. She said I was her rock until the day she passed the bar and called me embarrassing. She left me with a single sentence: I need a man on my level. That night, I disappeared without telling a soul, not to hurt her, but to find out why. Because what I discovered next, it wasn't just a divorce, it was a setup by my own family, and the worst betrayal hadn't even happened yet. I pulled into the parking lot a little before noon, easing my truck between two shining sedans that looked like they had just rolled off a showroom floor. The law school's big networking luncheon was already in full swing. I could see people stepping out of black cars, adjusting their jackets, greeting each other like they'd known one another for years. I sat for a second with my hands on the wheel, letting my eyes settle. My steel lunchbox was still on the passenger seat from the early shift I had finished just an hour earlier. I pushed it under the seat so it wouldn't stand out and grabbed the invitation Mara had left on the kitchen counter. Inside the lobby, the air felt cooler. Polished marble reflected every step, and the smell of catered chicken and buttered rolls drifted through the hallway. Everyone moved with this quiet confidence, like they belonged there. I tried to keep my shoulders straight while making my way to the sign-in table. A couple of volunteers sat behind it, smiling brightly as they checked people in. I told them my name. They scanned their list, then scanned it again, slower this time. One of them tapped the paper with her finger and said she didn't see me on the guest of honor family list. I figured maybe the sheet was old, or maybe they had printed the wrong copy. She opened a cardboard box filled with name tags, flipped through them, and finally held one out. This is the only Halden tag we have. I took it without thinking. When I glanced down, the air around me seemed to tighten just a bit. The tag read in bold letters, "Service Staff." I let out a small breath and asked gently if there might be a mix-up. The volunteer gave me a kind smile, the type people offer when they're sure they're right. "That's the only one with your last name. Maybe you were added late." I didn't want to hold up the line, so I thanked her and stepped aside. I told myself it didn't matter. Mistakes happen. People are busy. Still, as I clipped the tag to my shirt, I felt something settle in my chest, a quiet heaviness that didn't belong there. Past the lobby, a crowd gathered around the tables. Mara stood with a group near the podium, laughing easily, her hair pinned back the way she liked for formal events. She looked polished, confident, and completely at home. I took a steady breath and walked toward her, hoping the mix-up at the table would be cleared up once she saw it. She turned as I came closer, her smile flattening for a moment when she noticed the tag. Instead of walking over or correcting it, she gave a soft, controlled grin. When I reached her side, she leaned in. "Just leave it. You blend better this way." Her whisper slid under my skin more sharply than the tag itself. I kept my head level and nodded. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she didn't want to draw attention. The room felt a little warmer, though. I stood beside her while she talked to her colleagues, trying to look comfortable, as if the label on my chest wasn't announcing something I had never been. A professor stepped forward, greeting Mara with a familiar pat on her arm before turning to me. His handshake was firm, polite. "So you're the one funding her journey. We're always grateful for supporters." Supporters, donors, not spouses, not partners. Mara didn't correct him. She just let the moment drift by. When he walked away, she lowered her voice again. "It's easier this way. Just go along with it, please." I nodded because this was her day. and I didn't want to be the reason anything felt off. Still, my mind drifted back through the years. The extra shifts I'd taken, the nights she stayed up studying while I sat at the kitchen table doing the bills, the times I told her she could do anything she set her mind to. Back then, it felt like we were building something together. Standing there now, with the wrong tag pinned to my shirt, I wondered when the building turned into something else. People walked by, glancing at me, then at her, the way folks do when they're trying to guess a story. I overheard someone behind me mutter that I didn't look like I fit. Mara kept talking to her colleagues without acknowledging it. She didn't seem bothered. I stayed quiet, choosing calm over confrontation, even though the words stayed lodged somewhere between my ribs. As the luncheon went on, I noticed the way her posture shifted around her professional circle, her voice clipped, her tone more polished. The woman I knew at home had always been warm, quick to joke, easy to sit with on the couch after a long day. Here, she sounded like someone who had already stepped into a different life and wasn't sure how to make space for the one standing beside her. I tried to shake the feeling off. I told myself she had earned this moment, but every time I caught her looking past me, as if waiting for someone else to show up, a quiet question rose inside me. Was she embarrassed by me? Or embarrassed by the part of herself that still remembered where we started? She didn't look back at me once as we walked to the truck. I stayed a few steps behind, watching her heels click against the sidewalk, her arms crossed, her face turned away. I thought about saying something light, maybe make a joke about the name tag. Just something to break the weight hanging between us. That was a mix-up, I offered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Guess next time I should wear a tie that says, "Not a waiter." She didn't laugh. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes stayed on her phone. "You could have dressed better," she muttered. "You made it awkward." I looked down without thinking. My work boots were still covered in a fine dust from this morning. I had wiped them down the best I could before heading to the luncheon, but they were work boots. They didn't belong in rooms with leather floors and polished silverware. She walked faster, putting more distance between us. She didn't stop until she was standing by the passenger side of my truck. I unlocked it from a few steps back, and she got in without waiting for me. I paused before getting in. The air outside the cab was cooler than the one between us. Inside, the silence pressed down like a full toolbox on my chest. She stared at her phone, thumbs flying, probably texting classmates about the event, maybe already making plans for dinner or drinks. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands on the wheel, trying to find a lane, not just on the street, but in this new world we seemed to be entering, where I no longer fit. "You hungry?" I asked finally. "No." One word, not even a glance. I nodded to myself, pretending it was fine. I told myself she was just tired, that it had been a long day. My boots scraped lightly against the floor mat every time I hit the brake. For years, those boots had been part of me. Climbing ladders, standing in the cold, clocking in before sunrise so she could sleep a little longer and study. They weren't fancy, but they were mine. They'd put food on our table. They'd paid her tuition. But now, sitting next to her silence, even I started to see them through her eyes. As if they meant something less than they used to. As if they were holding her back instead of carrying us both. We didn't speak again until I turned down the gravel road to my mother's place. We had to drop off a few gardening tools we'd borrowed. Mara looked up from her phone just long enough to see where we were, then went back to texting. My brother Royce opened the door before I could even knock. He grinned wide and slapped me on the back. "Look who's here," he said, then turned to Mara with a smile. "Big day coming up, huh? You're gonna be the star of this family real soon." "Trying my best," Mara said, laughing as she stepped past me into the house. Royce didn't wait for me. He was already leading her toward the living room. "Ma, they're here," he called out. My mother appeared from the kitchen, drying, her hands on a dish towel. She gave Mara a long, warm hug, whispering something I couldn't hear. When she turned to me, it was just a nod. "Tools are in the truck," I said, holding up the keys. "Just leave them in the shed," she said, then went back to chatting with Mara. I dropped them off and came back inside. From the hallway, I heard them laughing again. My mother's voice, soft and admiring. "We always knew you'd make it, sweetheart." Jarvis. Well, he's always been steady. Predictable. Predictable. Like a flat line on a heart monitor. Like something that doesn't change, doesn't grow, doesn't matter. I stood there for a second, not sure if I should walk in or disappear out the door. I chose to sit down on the far end of the couch. Mara was holding court like she belonged there. She talked about offers from firms in Atlanta and Chicago, about partners and billables. My brother made a face and nudged me. "Jarvis, better keep up or she'll leave you in the dust." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. Like it was funny. Like it didn't hit where I lived. Mara didn't deny it. She just smirked, took a sip of her water, and kept going. I didn't hear anyone ask how work was going for me. No one asked how my shoulder was healing since I strained it last month on a 2-story scaffold. Nobody asked anything, really. I used to believe marriage meant moving through life side by side. Lately, it felt like I was pushing a train uphill with my bare hands, and the train was starting to speed away from me. "She's just overwhelmed," I told myself. "She didn't mean anything by it. Maybe I'm too sensitive." But then again, maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was finally noticing the small things, the way she laughed louder when someone else made a joke, the way she pulled her hand back quicker when I tried to hold it, the way her voice took on a new pitch when she said my name, as if trying not to make it sound too familiar. We stayed another 20 minutes. I barely spoke. Mara didn't seem to notice. As we were leaving, my mother followed us to the porch. She put her hand on Mara's shoulder. "We're all counting on you, darling. You're the future here." I turned back, half expecting her to say something to me too. But she didn't. Mara walked ahead toward the truck, her steps light, shoulders straight. I followed, keys in hand. Something heavy in my chest and a question growing louder inside me. When did I become the one fading into the background? And I didn't know it yet, but the moment we pulled into our driveway that night, the fracture between us was about to widen into something I could no longer ignore. The truck's tires crunched over wet gravel as we pulled into the driveway. The sky had turned a dull steel gray, the kind that tells you the rain's just getting started. Light drops tapped the windshield, slow at first, then steady. Mara didn't wait. Before I could shift into park, she was already out, slamming the door behind her. I watched her walk up the path alone, arms crossed, head low, not from the rain, but from something colder, something heavier. I sat there for a second, both hands still gripping the wheel. I'd seen her walk like that before, back when she used to come home from class drained and worn down. But tonight, it wasn't exhaustion. It was distance. I finally killed the engine and followed her in. The porch light above the door flickered twice, then held steady. It hadn't done that yesterday. Inside, the air felt still. No music playing, no scent of food or candles, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft shuffle of her steps across the hardwood. That's when I noticed the first thing, Her shoes, those expensive heels she only wore to big events, weren't placed beside mine like always. They were on the far end of the rack, tucked away, as if they belonged to someone else. Her coat hung on a different hook, too. She'd always hung it beside mine. Tonight, she chose the opposite end. I walked in slowly, setting my keys down on the counter. Her purse was already on the side table, placed neatly apart from my work bag, which I hadn't even brought in yet. Everything about the room felt reset, as if she'd been reorganizing the idea of us while I was still trying to hold it together. She didn't say anything, not about the ride, the rain, the silence. She didn't mention the tag on my chest from the event. She didn't even look up. She just walked past me, scrolling through her phone, like I was someone she'd once known, back before she decided she was going places I couldn't follow. I waited until she passed the kitchen, then followed behind. "Mara," I said softly. She didn't respond. I stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Did today bother you at all? I mean, the way people treated me?" Her eyes stayed on her phone. "Jarvis, you're too sensitive. You read into everything." That stung. I waited, gave her space to reconsider, but she didn't. So I tried again. "They thought I was one of the caterers," I said, voice low. "They handed me a staff badge. I stood there, and not a single person even thought to ask if I belonged, because to them, I didn't. I was erased." She finally looked up. "It's not my job to fix how you feel." The words dropped like a stone in my gut. I turned to the counter, needing something to do with my hands. I poured myself a glass of water, even though I wasn't thirsty. Just something to fill the silence. She stood across from me, not moving, still on her phone. I noticed she'd placed her new leather briefcase on the counter, dead center. She never left it there. Normally, it stayed by the front door or in her office. Leaving it in the kitchen, where we shared dinner, laughed, argued, lived, felt intentional. A statement. This is who I am now. I looked at it, then at her, and asked quietly, "Are you ashamed of me?" She laughed. Not because something was funny, but because it wasn't. She stepped away from the island and leaned against the fridge, arms folded. "Then," she said it. "You looked out of place today," she said, voice flat, like she was reading from a script. "I'm embarrassed when you show up to important events. You just don't fit." My chest went tight. The air around me shrank. The light above the sink flickered once, and for a second, I thought maybe I imagined it. She didn't stop. "I worked too hard to be dragged down by someone who refuses to evolve." I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My hands gripped the glass so tight I thought it might break. She stood there another few seconds, then turned and walked toward the hallway. No apology. No hesitation. Just her heels clicking softly against the floorboards as she moved away. I stayed in the kitchen, not moving. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the water in my glass to go warm. Long enough for the rain outside to become steady, hissing against the windows like the house was wrapped in static. I sat down slowly at the table, staring at my palms. The calluses, the dirt still caught beneath my nails even after a full wash. These hands built her future. These hands paid for everything she was proud of. And now, they were the reason she turned away. I kept hearing it, over and over. "You don't fit." I thought about every shift I'd taken when my back was on fire. Every time I'd driven her to class before heading straight to a job site. Every time I told myself, "This is worth it. We're worth it." Was I ever enough? Or was I always just a placeholder until she could afford to leave? The name tag, the silence, the laugh, and now, this. This wasn't about one bad day. This was the truth finally showing its face. The sound of the bedroom door closing snapped me out of it. No words, no goodnight. She was done for the night. And maybe, deep down, with more than just the evening. I stayed at the table until the clock hit midnight. The fridge hummed behind me. The rain softened. But inside, something new had taken hold. There are moments that split a life in two, the before and the after. That night, I felt the split begin. And when she finally opened that bedroom door, what she said next pushed the fracture even deeper, far deeper than I ever imagined. The door creaked open with a kind of caution that made my heart tighten. She didn't step into the kitchen right away, just stood there in the hallway, lit faintly by the lamp behind her, scrolling her phone like she'd been preparing for something. Rehearsing, maybe. Mara didn't meet my eyes. She didn't even glance in my direction. She leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, calm, like she wasn't about to drop something heavy between us. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low, even. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." I nodded before I could think. My hands were still resting on the table, fingers slightly curled around the glass I hadn't touched in a while. She took a breath, then let it out like she was about to read from a script. "I've been offered a position at a firm in Atlanta. They want me to start next month." For half a second, instinct kicked in. "That's big. Congrats," I said, almost automatic. She didn't smile, just stood there with that blank expression that didn't belong to the woman I married. That face belonged to someone who'd already left the room, maybe left a long time ago. She shifted her stance and added, "And I'm moving there. Alone." It took a second. The word sank in, heavy and sharp. "Alone?" I asked. "What do you mean alone?" "I mean exactly that." She finally looked at me, barely. "It's time I lived the life I earned. And Jarvis, you and I don't belong in the same world anymore." I flinched, not visibly, but I felt it inside, deep. That kind of sentence doesn't just bruise, it erases. "We planned this together," I said, keeping my voice level. "I worked while you studied. I gave up." "That's just it," she cut in. "You're still living in what we planned. I want what I deserve." She walked over, not to me, but to her briefcase still sitting on the counter. She opened it, took out a thin white envelope, and set it down in front of me. She sat across the table, calm, too calm. Inside the envelope, divorce papers, clean, final, dated 3 days ago. "I need these signed before the week's out," she said. "I want everything settled before the move." I stared at the papers, but the words blurred. My eyes didn't want to accept them. She continued, her voice as firm as it was distant. "This is what's best for both of us. You can't follow me where I'm going." That's when I realized this wasn't a decision she made tonight, or yesterday. She'd rehearsed it, folded it into her life without telling me. She'd been packing up her heart while I was still clinging to the idea of us. The house felt suddenly unfamiliar. The kitchen, once ours, now looked like a space I'd wandered into by accident. My hands shook slightly under the table. I managed to ask quietly, "Was today your way of telling me goodbye?" Mara tilted her head. "No. Today was just the last confirmation I needed." Those words didn't sting. They tore. No anger, no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just a clean, calculated end like I was a chapter she was done reading. I sat there, trying to piece together how we'd gotten from late-night study sessions and shared takeout boxes to this. Two people on opposite sides of a table, like strangers negotiating terms. She stood again, unbothered, and began walking toward the bedroom. I couldn't move. I was locked in place by everything that wasn't said over the last year. Every shrug, every time she turned away, every "I'm just tired" that covered for something else. I looked back, really looked, at the past 12 months. The long hours, the canceled plans, the way her phone always seemed more important, the missed good nights. I used to think it was all temporary, that she'd come back to us once she had space to breathe. But the truth is, she'd been building a new life, one I wasn't in. She returned with a small overnight bag and some folded clothes. "I'll sleep in the guest room until it's done," she said without emotion. At the hallway, she paused, not to say sorry, not to explain, but to drive the nail in just a little deeper. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "You and I stopped being a team a long time ago." She disappeared down the hall, door shutting behind her with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any slam could have. I didn't follow, didn't speak. I just sat there, papers in hand, memories spinning, breath catching. The rain had stopped outside, but inside me, something was flooding fast. 9 years, reduced to paperwork on a kitchen table. But just when I thought the worst had already happened, the next morning brought a truth that cut even deeper. The light filtering in through the blinds was pale and uncertain, like it wasn't sure it wanted to see what had become of us. My neck ached from sleeping wrong on the couch. The cushions were thin and lumpy, and my left arm had gone numb halfway through the night. I didn't remember falling asleep, just drifting into something between exhaustion and surrender. I sat up slowly. The house was still. Not quiet in a peaceful way. Quiet in that eerie, emptied-out way, like the silence was holding its breath. I glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom door stood wide open. She was gone. The same way fog disappears off a windshield in the sun. No trace, no effort, just vanished. I pushed myself up and walked into the kitchen. It looked cleaner than usual, like someone had tried to erase the signs of life here. A plate sat drying by the sink, a coffee cup turned upside down. My lunchbox still on the counter where I left it. The divorce papers, untouched, sat in the same place she'd left them last night. I stared at them like they were written in another language, and yet, somehow, they made more sense than anything else in that moment. I moved through the house slowly, as if walking through a memory. In the living room, the bookshelf had new gaps. I couldn't name every missing title, but I could feel the spaces where her things used to be. On the dresser in our bedroom, the small framed photo from our courthouse wedding was gone. Her side of the frame was always dusted. Mine had a smudge from when I last moved it. Now only my half remained. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was gone. That one hit harder than it should have. She had already been leaving me long before she said the words. That much was obvious now. Every detail screamed it. I walked back into the kitchen, rubbing my face with both hands. Her laptop was open on the dining table. The screen had gone to sleep, but I could see a faint notification light blinking in the corner. I didn't mean to touch it. I really didn't. But my hand moved almost without permission. I tapped the touchpad. The screen lit up. Her email was open. The subject line read, "Offer acceptance. Mara Kinsley." It took a second. I read it again. Not Halden. Kinsley. I felt something jolt in my chest. I clicked into the email. There it was. Her full signature, clean and professional. Mara Elise Kinsley. Esker. No trace of me. No hyphen. No mention. Nothing. I sat down. Some part of me wanted to believe it was just a one-off, a formality, but curiosity, or maybe self-harm, made me dig further. Her law school portal was still logged in. I clicked through. Her profile, her resume, all listed under Kinsley. She had changed her name already, not after asking, not after the papers, not after a conversation. Before she even told me she was leaving. It wasn't just about moving on. It was about rewriting, scrubbing my name from the record like I'd never existed. I sat there, whispering into the hollow space around me. I lost her long before she handed me those papers. I remembered how proud I used to be when someone called us the Haldens. I imagined kids with that last name, family reunions, old photo albums. Now it all felt like a fantasy I'd written alone. I clicked through more of her folders, her awards, transcripts, emails with professors, mentors, the firm in Atlanta. All clean, sharp, polished. Nowhere, not once, did my name appear. It was like I'd been a shadow, a stepping stone. I closed the lid slowly and pushed the laptop aside, needing something, anything. I called my mother. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice was distracted. "Mara already left?" she asked, skipping hello. "Yeah," I said. "She's gone." There was a pause, then, "Well, I guess she's chasing her dreams. She always had that fire. You've always been steady. Steady, like a paperweight." "She'll do big things," Mom added. "You're strong. You'll be fine." Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she say I deserved better. I hung up before the conversation turned into a pep talk that wasn't meant for me. I sat in that empty kitchen, hearing my mother's voice echo the same thing I heard at Mara's family luncheon. From Royce, from everyone. She'll make something of herself. I looked again at the papers. They weren't just a contract. They were a mirror, showing me who I'd become, or maybe who I'd always been in her eyes. And for the first time, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not revenge, just something still and hard like a boundary. A line I hadn't drawn before because I was too busy trying to earn love that had already left the room. I whispered it, barely audible. Maybe losing someone who never really saw me isn't the worst thing that could happen. I didn't touch the papers, not yet. I stood up, picked up my steel lunchbox, the one she once laughed at when I brought it to her graduation party, and shrugged on my work jacket. I slipped my boots on without tying the laces all the way. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't breathe in that house any longer. I didn't take anything else. No phone, no wallet, no ring, just my keys and that old lunchbox. As I stepped outside, the air was cool and damp. The sky was clearing. The driveway was empty. So was I. And yet, with every step away from that house, something deep inside began to quiet. I didn't know it then, but walking out of that door with nothing but my lunchbox and my keys was the first step toward disappearing from her world completely. I didn't head anywhere specific, just drove. The sun had pushed past the gray clouds by mid-afternoon, casting long strips of light over the dash. I turned off the radio. No music, no voices, just the hum of the tires and the old engine that had carried me through a decade of early mornings and overtime hours. For the first time in months, maybe years, the silence didn't feel like a sentence. It felt like breathing room. I ended up parking at that little community park by the water treatment plant. Hardly scenic, but it was quiet. I found a bench tucked under a sycamore tree and sat. Lunchbox beside me. Just sat. Around me, life moved on. A mother pushed a stroller past the swing set. A couple walked a golden retriever. 2 older men played chess under the pavilion, arguing over rules like they had for the last 15 years. Normal. Unbothered. Unaware. I watched, letting the stillness soak in. My hands rested on my knees. Rough, calloused, marked from years of handling machine parts and grease. These hands built a life, paid bills, carried groceries, changed tires, held Mara's back when she cried the night she got rejected from her first law internship. Those same hands now sat idle, unsure what they were supposed to hold on to anymore. For so long, I thought being dependable meant being good. But dependable's just another word for invisible when the person you're building with is climbing over you to reach something else. That thought didn't come with bitterness. It came with clarity. A sharp buzz broke the moment. My phone lit up. Kyle. My older brother only called when something serious was going down. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom wants you at the house," he said, voice tight. "Now." I paused. "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Just come, Jarvis. Everyone's already here." I felt my stomach knot. I hadn't even told them what happened. Hadn't told anyone, really. But something about his voice told me I was walking into more than just dinner. It was late afternoon by the time I pulled up to the house I grew up in. Familiar gravel crunched under my tires. 5 cars were already parked out front. The porch light was already on, though the sun hadn't quite dipped yet. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet for a house full of people. I stepped into the living room. They were all there. Mom, Kyle, my sister, Erin, even Aunt Merrill from across town. No one spoke when I walked in, just turned to look. Mom stood, arms folded like she was delivering a verdict, her lips pressed into a line that made my gut tense up the way it used to when I'd come home late as a teenager. She didn't waste time. "We need to talk about what you did to Mara." I blinked. "What I did?" She stepped forward, voice steady and cold. "You embarrassed her. She's been through enough. And now she has to deal with whispers and shame because of your choices." I looked around the room. No one interrupted. No one asked me anything. "She told us everything," Erin added, not even looking at me. "That luncheon, you acted like a fool. Made her look like she married beneath her." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out at first. "She said you refused to evolve," Aunt Merrill chimed in. "That you've held her back." "She told you all that," I said finally. "But did she tell you how she's been treating me for the last year? How I was staff at that event? Not a husband. Staff." Kyle glanced at me, jaw tight but eyes unsure. Mom didn't budge. "She deserves better than this mess," Erin muttered again, arms crossed. I felt each word like a stone dropped on my chest. And then, my mother stepped closer. She lowered her voice, not to comfort me, but to sharpen the blade. "You've always been too soft, Jarvis. Always needed someone to carry you. That's why she left. A woman like her doesn't want a man who's weak." The word hung there, heavy, ugly, weak. I'd heard that word my whole life. On the football field, at the factory, from her. But this time, coming from my own mother, it hit somewhere deeper than I expected. It didn't just sting, it carved. The room waited for me to argue, to defend myself. But I didn't. I sat down in the same worn recliner I used to fall asleep in during holidays. I sat there and let the silence stretch long and awkward. They expected yelling, justifications, a breakdown. But I was done trying to win something that was never mine to begin with. Something shifted in me right then, not loudly, not all at once, but solid, permanent. If I'm weak no matter what I do, I thought, then there's no point playing by their rules. They could keep their story. Let them play judge and jury. I wasn't standing on their stage anymore. I stood up slowly, looked each of them in the eye, not with anger, but with the kind of calm that only comes when you've truly stopped expecting anything from the people who should have had your back. Thanks for the feedback, I said. My voice didn't shake. If you want to support her, do it. I'm not stopping anyone, but I won't let you rewrite my life just to fit her version of the truth. No one moved. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. I didn't wait. I walked out, pulling the front door shut behind me without a word. The sky had started to bruise into early evening. I climbed back into my truck. My fingers trembled a bit on the wheel, not from fear, but adrenaline. A kind of freedom I didn't recognize at first. I didn't start the engine right away, just sat there, breathing. I wasn't signing the papers, not now, not from spite, but because I needed time to figure out who I was beneath all the labels they'd handed me. Weak, soft, burden. I wasn't those things. I just hadn't had space to prove it, not even to myself. I glanced at the lunchbox beside me. That same old box she mocked, saying it made me look like someone stuck in the past. But it was still here. Still mine. Tomorrow I'd disappear too. Not to hide, but to finally live on my terms. The night crept into morning without me noticing. Parked behind an old gas station, engine off, wrapped in a thin flannel jacket, I'd slept barely 2 hours. When my eyes blinked open, frost covered the inside of the windshield, casting my reflection in dull, ghostly outlines. My breath came out in thin clouds. My neck cracked when I tried to sit up straighter. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then, the ache in my lower back and the cold metal of the lunchbox beside me reminded me exactly why I was there. My phone screen lit up when I reached for it. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. 1 number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before playing the message, like something inside me already knew the tone on the other end wasn't going to offer peace. Speaker on. Volume halfway. The voice came smooth, clipped, and far too calm. This is attorney Roland Pierce. I represent your wife, Ms. Mara Kinsley. The name hit me harder than the legal tone. Ms. Mara Kinsley, not Halden. No hesitation. She'd cut the name like a dead limb. The voice continued, firm and practiced. You have until Friday to return the signed documents. If you do not comply, we will proceed without your cooperation. There was no room for conversation in that message, just a deadline. Cold, rehearsed, strategic. I sat there, staring at nothing. The windshield had fogged again with my breath. Outside, the sky had just started shifting from navy to gray. Dawn, barely. She didn't just want to end things. She wanted to erase me, like I was a misstep on her professional resume. I called the number back before I could talk myself out of it. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Halden? Yes. This is Roland Pierce. You said she submitted statements? Yes, he replied, tone never changing. Declarations from her family, friends, and notably, your mother. I froze. My mother? Yes, he confirmed without pause. Your refusal to sign is unnecessary. Ms. Kinsley has documented emotional instability on your part. He said it like he was reading off a grocery list. I hung up. I didn't trust myself to stay calm if I kept listening. I drove. By 7:30 a.m., I was sitting in a corner booth at Edie's Diner off I-64, Same place I used to stop by after night shifts. The waitress recognized me, gave me a polite nod, and set down black coffee without asking. I didn't touch it, just watched the steam rise and fall. I opened my email on my phone. The PDF from the attorney was sitting there, subject line, formal statements. Your client proceedings. I tapped it open, hands already shaking, not from fear, from something else. Page 1. Jarvis exhibits patterns of withdrawal, unpredictable behavior, and emotional volatility. Not a single sentence in that paragraph was true. Not one. I kept reading. My mother's name appeared on page 3. I have long been concerned about Jarvis's emotional state. He has always struggled to cope with conflict. Below it, another line in her own words. Mara often came to me in tears over his instability. I felt the booth press in on me. My lungs didn't expand right. The smell of coffee and frying bacon turned my stomach. I read that line again. Then again. She didn't just betray me. She volunteered. She helped them build the case, signed her name under their story, as if everything I had ever done, every sacrifice, every compromise, was just a build-up to this accusation. She handed Mara the knife and even told her where to cut. I set the phone down, didn't cry, didn't speak. The waitress came by and asked if I wanted breakfast. I shook my head. She didn't ask again. That silence, the one I'd feared for so long, was now the only thing keeping me from unraveling. But it didn't feel empty. It felt clean. There was no noise left, just facts. Cold, unchangeable, undeniable. They had chosen their version of me, and now I had to choose mine. I opened the PDF again and read every line slowly. I listed the names in my head, my sister Erin, my mother, probably even Kyle with some weakly worded paragraph about my tendencies to isolate. They weren't just picking Mara. They were rewriting me. For years, I'd been the one who showed up, who fixed flat tires, covered rent shortfalls, sat through birthdays and family dinners, even when I felt like a ghost in the room. Because that's what you do when you're part of something bigger than yourself. But that only works if the people on the other end believe you belong. I had been convenient, not valued, and now that I didn't serve a purpose, they were handing me over like a receipt for a returned item. I looked out the diner window. Cars passed on the highway. I watched one old Ford truck, maybe 94 or 95, roar by, rust around the fenders, 2 kids in the back with a dog. For a split second, I remembered being that kid, in my dad's truck, before he passed, before Mom changed, before the family became something with rules you couldn't question. I whispered to no one, "They're not just choosing her, they're rewriting me." The words didn't crack, they just settled. I paid the bill and left a 20 on the table, more than needed. The waitress gave me a nod without smiling. By 9:15 a.m., I was back in my truck, parked behind the warehouse where I used to do overnight shifts. It was quiet now. Business didn't pick up until after 10. I parked in the back lot, shaded by the building, and stared at my phone again. This version of me, the one they wrote down, couldn't be the one left behind. I wasn't signing those papers. Not until I had my version documented, sealed, and understood. I didn't need revenge, but I wasn't going to disappear without setting the record straight. They could think I was quiet, weak, passive. They had no idea that silence can cut deeper than any insult when it's used right. It was time to fight smart. And just when I started planning my next move, a single unexpected message appeared on my phone, one that would change the entire battle. No name, no text, just an image file. I sat in my truck, parked behind the loading dock, hands still gripping the steering wheel even though the engine had been off for nearly 10 minutes. The sun had fully climbed over the horizon now, casting sharp beams through the cracked windshield. I tapped on the image. It loaded slowly. First her hair, then her smile. Mara. She was laughing, head tilted slightly, one hand wrapped around the stem of a wine glass. Behind her was a wall of golden backlighting and crisp white tablecloths. An expensive place, too polished to be casual, too intimate to be professional. But it wasn't just her. The man beside her wore a tailored charcoal suit, one hand resting on the small of her back like he'd done it 100 times, his chin angled slightly toward her, eyes focused on her like she was the only person in the room. I zoomed in, and there it was. I recognized him. Roland Kendrick, the senior partner from the Atlanta firm. He'd visited our house twice during Mara's last semester. I'd offered him a beer the first time. He declined. Barely looked at me both times. Treated me like the delivery guy who stayed too long in the foyer. But now, in this photo, he looked like her world. I stared at the image so long, the screen dimmed. The months came rushing back. Her distant eyes, those nights she studied late, the text messages she never let me see. I'd asked, gently at first, then firmly. She always brushed it off. I thought she was chasing ambition. She was chasing him. The betrayal didn't knock the wind out of me. It clarified everything. She didn't just leave me. She had replaced me. And she'd done it with someone from the world she believed she was finally good enough for. And while she was positioning herself next to him at high-end restaurants, she was telling my family I was unstable. She wasn't escaping a broken marriage. She was laying down cover fire. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. You deserve to know the truth. I called it back. No answer. I texted, "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Whoever it was, they weren't ready to show their face, but they knew enough. And I had a feeling they weren't finished. I didn't want to go to work. But sitting in that truck with nothing but silence and screenshots would have broken something in me. So I drove across town and pulled into the lot like always. Daniel, my supervisor, was already out front, clipboard in hand. He glanced at me as I walked in and asked, "You good?" I gave him the same answer I gave everyone who ever asked that. Just tired. He didn't push, just nodded. But I knew I wasn't fooling anyone. My thoughts weren't on the floor plans or shift rotations. They were on that photo. The way she leaned into him. The way his hand fit like it belonged there. At 12:13 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Blocked sender. It was an email. Subject line FWD. Internal memo. HR. The content was short. Corporate lingo. Pending marital status update required for travel and relocation package. Once Ms. Kinsley's divorce is finalized, partner transition may begin. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. So that's why she wanted it done fast. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't conflict. It was paperwork. She needed to be legally single to transition into her new position. With him, I felt the world tilt slightly. Like I'd been walking through fog for weeks and someone just flipped on a spotlight. Every conversation we had in the last 2 months, her urgency, her coldness, her refusal to answer basic questions, it all snapped into place. I leaned back against the break room wall and let out a slow, steady breath. Not because I was calming down, because I needed the oxygen to think clearly. Daniel found me 10 minutes later. "You're off," he said plainly. "I'm working." "You're here," he replied. "That's not the same." I nodded. He hesitated, then added, "You want a few days? Unpaid, if that helps keep things simple." I looked him in the eye. "No. If I disappear now, I lose control of the story." He studied me for a second like he was deciding whether to challenge that, then just said, "All right, you know where I am." I left the warehouse early and walked back to my truck. The lunchbox still sitting on the passenger seat. Same one I'd carried every day for nearly a decade. Mara used to mock it, said it made me look like someone who stopped evolving after high school, but I never minded the comments. That lunchbox was me. Blue collar, reliable, simple. I set it in my lap. My fingers traced the worn edges. I whispered, "Enough." She wanted clean lines. She was going to get every line I had: dates, receipts, wire transfers, tuition payments. Every hour I worked overtime to cover her tuition. Every form I signed when she didn't qualify for credit. Every single part of her self-made success that was built on my sacrifice. I wasn't going to fight with rage. I was going to fight with records. The phone buzzed one more time. Same number. "You need to check her bar application." My hands froze, then moved fast. I pulled over behind a shuttered mechanic shop and opened the State Bar's licensing site. Mara's name was there, newly minted, bright and polished. I opened the public PDF of her application, and the words hit me harder than anything else that day. Family support, none. Financial independence, self-made. She deleted me, not just from her future, from her past, from the official record of how she became a lawyer. She rewrote the story, and in her version, I never existed. I sat there for a long time, staring, not crying, just deciding. I sat there in the cab of my truck for what felt like hours. The bar application was still open on my phone screen, casting a dull glow in the fading afternoon light. I read those words over and over. Family support, none. Financial independence, self-made. Then I closed the screen, slipped the phone onto the dashboard, and turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled awake, steady and familiar. I had 48 hours before her paperwork hit final review. That was enough. I started gathering. Old folders from the back closet, bank statements stacked in a cardboard box. I tore through file drawers, storage tubs, even shoeboxes marked with scrawled years, 2014, 2016, 2019. One by one, I pulled out receipts, tuition invoices, proof of rent payments, health insurance bills. I even found the notes I wrote when I helped her prep for mock trials, bullet point summaries, printouts I'd highlighted for her while she studied late into the night. Each slip of paper was small, meaningless alone, but together they told the story she had worked so hard to erase. By nightfall, my dining table looked like a courtroom exhibit. The next morning, I rented a small storage unit, climate-controlled out near Route 60. The manager barely looked up when I signed the lease, just slid the key across the counter and muttered, "Unit 214, lock it when you leave." Inside the unit, I sorted everything into boxes by year, taped them shut, marked them in thick black Sharpie. This wasn't about revenge. This was about record keeping, about memory. But as I stacked the last box, I noticed one more bin tucked in the corner, a gray plastic one, dusty and taped shut. I cracked the lid open. Inside were the original loan receipts from her first semester, ones I'd co-signed. I remembered signing the papers, remembered her smile afterward, the way she kissed my cheek and said, "One day, you'll be proud you helped build this." And under the receipts was something I hadn't seen in years, a flash drive, small, red-capped, labeled in her handwriting, Mara 1L. I took it home and plugged it into my laptop. The folders loaded slow, clunky video files, PDFs, some audio. One folder was named Mentor Sessions. I clicked on the first video. It opened with a shaky camera angle, like it had been set on a desk. Mara sat on one side, her hair tied back, her tone casual, confident. Across from her sat the man from the restaurant, the senior partner. She leaned in slightly and said, clear as day, "I'll outgrow him. He's useful now. Later. We'll see." I didn't blink, didn't even breathe. She wasn't caught in something accidental. She planned it. That was the final break in me. Not anger, not grief, just confirmation. I copied everything. Every PDF, every photo, every receipt. I created a clean, organized folder on a new drive and labeled it Bar Declarations, Supplemental Evidence. Inside it, I placed her bar, application, the image of her with the senior partner, and the video. I wrote a single email to the ethics committee listed under the bar's licensing division. I didn't accuse, I didn't editorialize. I simply wrote, "This is the full version of events relevant to the applicant's declarations. Respectfully submitted, Jarvis Halden." Then I saved it, but I didn't send it, not yet. Because at 4:37 p.m., my phone rang. My mother. Her voice was steady, not emotional. She said, "We're going to Atlanta this weekend to help Mara get settled." I didn't say anything. She continued, "I'm asking you not to embarrass her, or us. Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Do the right thing." I didn't answer. She paused, then added, "You've done enough damage already, Jarvis." That's when I knew. They weren't calling to reconcile. They were calling to contain. At 5:04, Kyle called. His voice was lower, harder to read. "I need to tell you something," he said. "They asked us for statements weeks ago, before she gave you the divorce envelope." "Statements?" "Yeah, about your behavior. They said it was for a character reference." I didn't know what she was planning, man. I swear. I believed him. But it didn't matter. The story had already been built. She wrote the script. They agreed to play their parts. I was the antagonist in someone else's production. After I hung up, I sat at my desk and looked at the blinking cursor in the draft email. Then I hit send. No warning. No explanation. Just truth. Later that evening, I received an automated reply acknowledging the submission. And 2 hours after that, a formal email. "We are placing the applicant's file under review. A temporary pause in certification has been initiated." I exhaled, not in triumph, in release. She tried to erase me. I didn't let her. A few days later, I returned to the house, alone. I boxed up the rest of my things, left behind everything that wasn't mine or didn't matter. The coffee maker she picked, the rugs she ordered, the bookshelves she never used. But I took the toolbox from the garage, the jacket I wore through night shifts, the watch my father gave me before he passed, the lunchbox that reminded me of who I used to be and who I still was. As I locked the front door one last time, I didn't say goodbye to her. I said it to the man I used to be, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who swallowed truth to be seen as strong. I had lost a marriage, yes, but I'd reclaimed a life.